Good morning, and welcome to week one of Newman University's Business Ethics course. This is Dr. Larry Straub, and I briefly introduced myself yesterday on a intro and welcome video, and very much look forward to working with everybody this semester. As I think I mentioned in my welcome video, this is without a doubt one of my favorite classes. I genuinely enjoy the topic, and part of the reason I enjoy it is because of my background. I was a business executive, businessman and business executive in our family business for about 35 years. I was a CEO of the business for the last 22 years, and I was CFO for 5 years before that. So worked at very high levels in our organization. We were a 7-store complex in the agricultural equipment business, and we had about 150 employees and did over about $115 million a year at our peak. And so we did mergers, acquisitions. We did a lot of different things with that business. So most of the stuff that you'll study in business school in one form or another, we did and had my hands on pretty intricately in about all aspects and all levels. So in that respect, I don't mean to brag at this point, but I just want to let you know that I understand business ethics from a lot of different angles, from a lot of different levels. And I can also tell you that the last 3 to 4 or 5 years was very challenging for our business. So we really had to work hard to keep our business sustainable and profitable and in business in that last 3 to 5 years. And so we had a lot of pressures on us, and we had a lot of pressures that could have led us down some negative paths had we not been able to keep our perspective and keep our focus on what was right and what was ethical, not only for ourselves, but for the remainder of our stakeholders, whether it be employees, suppliers, manufacturers that we represented. And I feel we passed those tests as we went through that process until we sold our business a little over a year and a quarter ago. Since that time, I've been a full-time professor here at Newman, and I enjoyed this experience. I always planned to do this as a second act career, so really enjoying this. So what we're going to do each week is I'm going to make sure that we cover the objectives for each chapter. I'm actually going to use that as our framework for my video posts. So we'll go ahead and get started, and then after I go through the chapter and I go through the objectives, we'll talk about the assignments for the week and the videos that I have assigned for the week as well. Before we get into chapter 1, be sure and go in and explore the modules structures that I have set up in Canvas. Also explore the syllabus. I've tried to align the syllabus with the modules, and so you'll have a week 1, week 2, week 3, and so on modules, and I should have all of the assignments and everything in there. Video posts are on the syllabus, so just be sure and explore that. Make sure you know your way around all of that. Okay, on chapter 1, first objective is explore conceptualizations of business ethics from an organizational perspective. And to talk about this, I wanted to start out by saying, what does business ethics actually mean? Ethics and business. Do those two words even go together? Is it the same as morals? Is it the same as personal ethics? Probably not. So what exactly does it mean? And it could be asked, is business ethics an oxymoron? I mean, are the two words just polar opposites of each other? I know there are folks that question that, especially if you talk to folks that tend to be on the maybe more left-leaning end of the spectrum politically. I think many of them would say that business and ethics don't go together and they're not portrayed together. We'll talk about that as we go through this. I don't personally believe that, but we'll talk about the reasons why. Next is it's easy to ponder all of this on a higher plane in an academic setting. And we should and we need to do that. These types of classes are very, very important. But as I mentioned, as a decades-long practitioner and as a business manager and executive, I can tell you personally, I struggled with the balance daily and weekly at sometimes, especially the last few years of our company's existence as we struggled with the ups and downs of the agricultural equipment industry. I really, at times, all of us struggle with when the rubber meets the road, what does it mean to be ethical in business? And part of the reason for that is there's so many forces pushing you up to and potentially outside the acceptable ethical boundaries. And here's just a few of them. First is the pressures to keep your job. Even as the CEO and a part owner of our family business, still at the end of the day, I had a job in that business. And if the business didn't succeed and if the business wasn't in business, where was my job? What type of a job would I have? So you have those pressures, and I felt them just as much as any other employee in the business, maybe more so at some times. You have the pressures to keep your career on track and your reputation. Had my business failed, luckily we were able to have a successful sale. All of our employees were able to transition into new business, and the ones that didn't, it was because they found other positions. And so pretty much everybody landed on their feet. We had a successful sale of the business. Had we not been able to do that, we'd have been like Steinmart or some of these businesses that are actually having to take bankruptcy. That could have been a real personal hit to my reputation. And had that happened, would I have had as easy a job, not that it was real easy, but would I have had the possibilities of finding a job in academia like I did? There's also pressures to cover your family's financial needs. All of us have people that depend on us, or most of us do. And, so we have those pressures to keep the financial needs of our family unit or our social support unit. And finally, we have the pressures to keep our business profitable and sustainable over the long haul. So all of those pressures, and believe me, as a practitioner, I know firsthand that they can get very, very intense at times. All of these pressures are very real and they're relevant. And as I said, many people feel them at times and many people don't handle it the best. And through the years, as I noted, I struggled. Where are those lines? Where are the boundaries? I struggled with this question. Is it ever acceptable to get on the other side of those boundaries, those acceptable boundaries, temporarily to serve the long-term needs of the business or organization? I think anybody who's been in business for very long at all and had very much experience would say that yes, there are times you push those boundaries a little bit. And there may be times, and I would have to admit there are some times you jump over just a little bit, not to camp out there for the long haul, but just to get where you need to be, and then you try to get back on the right side as quickly as possible. So it happens in business. And I will say this, businesses don't go from A to Z all at once in terms of losing their ethical pathway. They usually do it gradually over an extended period of time. And sometimes they get far enough down that road to where it gets to be impossible to back up again. It's impossible to bring it back. The second objective is examine the historical foundations and evolutions of business ethics. And one thing I would just note in this regard is the struggle in terms of what is business ethics, what does it mean, what forms does it take. This isn't a new issue or challenge. Businesses have struggled with this for many, many decades, if not centuries. When you go back to the early trade merchants in the Far East or the robber barons in early US business history, there's no shortage of people who cut corners and outright cheated to get what they wanted and to get where they wanted. And we have probably more rules in place now, more government regulation in place now to keep people forcibly inside those boundaries, but you still see huge problems emerge at times. And then to bring us to more current and contemporary times, we currently struggle with what does it mean to have a businessman in the highest office in the US, the President of the United States. May have heard people say through the years, we need a businessman to run our government. Well, be careful what you wish for. That's what we have right now. And I don't mean to jump into the fray as far as politics, but the fact is we have a businessman that did not divest himself of his business interests. And so there are ethical conundrums all over the place. There are ethical dilemmas all over the place. And where and should those lines be drawn? Where should those lines of demarcation be? We have pretty firm rules on where and what that should be, but as you can see currently, they're up for debate, and we really don't seem to have consensus politically right now. So the historical foundations of evolution of business ethics, they go back centuries. We definitely have in the last century or so huge issues, and now we currently have them as well. So they never seem to go away. It's always something that we have to struggle with. The next objective is provide evidence that ethical value systems support business performance. You know, in this regard, the ultimate question would be, are good and appropriate ethics rewarded, even sustainable in business? And there are a lot of people that would have a spirited debate on this. Most people say the politically correct thing and that yes, they are, but there are some that would probably take the other side of the issue in an open forum and an open discussion with no repercussions. That's not necessarily where we are right now. I will say this, I believe that ethical business practices can and are rewarded. If you look at companies like Chick-fil-A and Hobby Lobby would just be two low-hanging fruit examples that I can think of. Both of those companies have a extremely high moral foundation, an ethical foundation for their businesses. Both of them, if I understand correctly, close on Sundays because they have religious convictions that they adhere to that dictates that. But there are other examples of businesses that do that. Now, there are some that I think push the boundaries and struggle with that. They say one thing, but they kind of do another. But I do think there are plenty of examples of good business practices and ethical practices out there. Now, on the other side of it, on the inverse, we see huge issues and huge prices that have been paid by companies that have not operated on an ethical framework and an ethical level in business. Think about Enron. That's a little before your time. Check the Wikipedia page and just Google Enron and you can see what I'm talking about. Arthur Andersen, which at one time was a big four accounting firm, they got caught up in the Enron scandal. That was back in the late 90s, if I remember right, maybe early 2000s. And it was a huge, huge scandal. And the debacle, and it took both companies down. Fortune 500 company, actually a company that had been chosen by Fortune magazine as the most admired company for a few years running. And then Arthur Andersen, as I said, was a Big Four accounting firm. Took both of them out in the span of less than a year's time. More contemporary example, which is still ongoing, is Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo had the account scandal where they were opening accounts unbeknownst to customers and unauthorized by customers. And in the span of less than about 2 to 3 years' time, they took one of the most respected brands in the world and in the country for sure, and absolutely trashed it. Now it is just a shell of its former self as far as respectability, at least. And I don't know that they'll ever recover and get that back. And then on the entertainment side of it, look at the Weinstein companies. Harvey Weinstein, the sex scandals and some of the predatory things that he did that took that huge entertainment company down, that was responsible for many, many of Hollywood's biggest blockbusters ever produced. The next objective, gain insight into the extent of ethical misconduct in the workplace and the pressures for unethical behavior. We talked about some of this previously. One thing I would note on this, are there companies that do very well that do not do it ethically? Yeah, there are. And they get away with it. Some of them for years, some of them for maybe even decades. And maybe as far as we know, some of them may get away with it forever, at least as far as we know. But is it a sustainable model? No, I don't believe it is. And first you have to think about how we define sustainable. I don't think of sustainable as a decade or less. I don't even think of sustainable as a couple of decades or less. I'm thinking of sustainable as 20 plus years, and even 30 and 40 and 50 plus years. I'm thinking of sustainable as multi-generational, where you can pass a business through ownership for 3 and 4 and 5 generations. And that's what I think of as sustainable. Now, if you look at something like Bernie Madoff, the financial scandal that Bernie Madoff pulled out, the Ponzi scheme, that went on for at least a couple of decades. So that seemed sustainable until it wasn't. And boy, when that house of cards came down, it came down fast and hard. And it took a lot of people with it. The last couple of things I want to talk about in this post is the second to last paper that you'll do in this class, and it's actually worth the most points of any assignment in this class, is developing a personal mission statement. And this is the first time I've had this structured this way. I actually had doing a personal mission statement as extra credit in previous classes. This and actually worth 15 points. This time it's a main part of your assignments, and it's worth 150 points, worth more than any other assignment. And there's a reason for this, because everything I've talked about to this point leads me to, you have to have a good ethical foundation. You have to have a good moral foundation. And believe it or not, that starts on a personal level, because individuals are CEOs of companies. And during our challenges and our struggles that we had with our companies our last few years, my personal mission statement, I feel like, is what kept us guided and on track. Not just that, but I think it was a big part of it because I was the CEO of the company. And even as challenging as things got, even as much as things got intense for us, I repeatedly made sure that our executives and our managers understood we weren't going to cut corners. We weren't going to do negative and illegal and unethical things to make this work. If it wasn't going to work, then we would figure out how to sell the business, which we ended up doing successfully, or worst case scenario, we would liquidate it. We would shut it down. hopefully before we had to declare bankruptcy and liquidate it out, hopefully be able to get our money out to our stockholders. But we were not going to do unethical behavior to try to keep this business going longer than maybe it could or should have. So having a mission statement is, to me, ground zero in terms of managing all the pressures that come with managing personal and business ethics. And just like a will, you want to write a mission statement when you're of sound mind and you're thinking clearly. So hopefully at this stage of the game in your life that you'll be able to check those boxes and be able to, think about things somewhat clearly. I know we're dealing with some pressures and some issues right now, but hopefully you can clear your mind enough to go through this process. And I would say this, and I believe it to my core, if you dig in and you do this right and you take this seriously, this will be one of the most important and crucial outcomes that you will have not only in this class, but in your time at Newman University. If you can come out with a good, solid, well thought out mission statement, and this mission statement will evolve and change as you go through life, and it should. It shouldn't just be static. It shouldn't stay the same. As your life moves in different directions, your mission statement will probably evolve somewhat. But this should be a very crucial thing that comes out of this class and even out of your Newman career if you do this right. And as we get a little further in the semester, probably in the next few weeks, actually, I will share my personal mission statement and I will post it on Canvas. And you're very welcome to use mine as an example if you wish for your own personal mission statement, at least the format, things like that. Or there are plenty of good online resources on how to write a good personal mission statement. Just Google that and you'll find a lot of good resources that will come up as well. So take this seriously and really work at it, and I'll be glad to help in any way I can. The videos for this week, I've got a couple. One is called What Happens When We Unbox Each Other. It's an incredible video. I think you'll find it enlightening and inspirational, hopefully. And then another one is kind of a comical one. It's from a character that you probably may not be familiar with if you're very young, by the name of Bob Newhart. The video is called Stop It. And this video highlights that sometimes the answers to our problems are a little simpler than we give ourselves credit for. Sometimes we overcomplicate things, and this video is kind of a tongue-in-cheek, comical way of highlighting that point. So I hope you'll definitely spend the time and watch each of those videos. As for the assignments for this week, read chapter 1 and then do discussion board 1. And these discussion boards, I ask that they be 1 to 2 pages in length. They can be a little longer if you get into one and you really want to dig in on it. There's really no upper limit that you can do. But this first discussion board, I'd just like you to introduce yourself to your fellow classmates. What's your major? What year in school are you? Anything you'd like to share about yourself and your life? What's your goals? Those type of things. And what's your opinion on the state of business ethics currently? How do you define ethics in time of fake news, win at all cost realities? What does it mean to be ethical in business in our current environment? And that discussion board is due by August 30th. Those have to be uploaded in Canvas. And so that's what your discussion board is. And both of those areas need to be covered in that discussion board. And again, 1 to 2 pages should suffice, and get that done for you. Okay, well, that's the post for this week. I will look forward to talking to you next Monday. Like I say, I'll try to get these done by noon on Monday each week. And we'll look forward to talking with you more then. Thank you.